listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II. If you've listened to music on Spotify, you've probably come across AI-generated music. You may not have noticed that AI imposter songs are being uploaded to real musicians' artist pages, including one country songwriter who was murdered in 1989. That's before streaming music online was even a dream. Emanuel Maiberg is a journalist and co-founder of 404 Media, an independent technology news website. He published a story this week called Spotify Publishes AI-Generated Songs from Dead Artists Without Permission. He spoke with the Metro's David Lyons about how AI imposters have found their way into Spotify and what artificial intelligence is doing to change media and culture as we know it.
When did you first hear about Spotify using AI-generated music under dead artist names?
There is a Reddit community called Mildly Infuriating. Are you familiar with this one?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
It's people posting mildly infuriating things, which could be like, oh, this product that I bought is broken, or someone in my family is being annoying. And like just a wide range of things that people find annoying. And someone posted a screenshot of the Spotify page for a song called Together from a country singer called Blaze Foley. And the person was pointing out that it was mildly infuriating that this song was clearly AI generated because he's a fan of Blaze Foley and he can just tell from the style and quality of the song that it wasn't really Blaze Foley, but it was showing up on Blaze Foley's official page. Blaze Foley has been dead for many years, and they found it disrespectful and offensive. And that's kind of when I first noticed it, went out, reached out to everyone involved, and verified that this was happening not just to Blaze Foley, but to other artists as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that stuck out in the piece that you wrote, was that I could see maybe somebody who happens to be toying around with AI music and wants to kind of just, I don't know, troll Blaze Foley's memory, which would be a mean thing to do, happens on the internet. Maybe it was just a one-off thing, but then there's actually several that you found. How widespread of an issue is this?
So it's hard to say exactly how many times this has happened. I mention 3 examples in the story. So there's Blaze Foley, and then there's another singer-songwriter named Guy Clark, who is more famous. He won a Grammy. There was a song that appeared on his official Spotify page called Happen to You. And yeah, Guy Clark died in 2016. This song also clearly not in his style. Then I found another example by an artist that is very much alive named Dan Burke. There was another fake song called With You on his Spotify page. And after I published the story, I actually heard from a lot more people who kind of flagged other Spotify pages to me that had the same problem. So I've personally seen, I would say, like dozens at this point, but it's hard to say exactly how widespread the problem is.
Mm-hmm. If you were not a fan of Blaze Foley before and you listened to it, did you hear anything that made it seem like, yeah, this is pretty obviously AI-generated music?
I wouldn't say obvious. I definitely would not say that it was obviously AI-generated. I think that if you listen very closely, there is something off about it. There's like this uncanny quality to it, both to the quality of the sound itself, but then also the lyrics and the arrangement. It's all weirdly generic, but also a little off in the same way that a lot of the AI generated images are. But I say this as someone who spends hours every day looking at AI generated content, and I'm hyper vigilant about that stuff. So I think I kind of was able to sniff it out, but it was definitely not obvious. It's much more sophisticated than other AI generated music that I've heard.
Okay, so let's listen really quick to a snippet from Together, which is the song not by Blaze Foley, but was uploaded to his artist page, and Spotify took it down after you inquired about it.
It's just that the night has fallen, and I wanna be with you. If only I had a little courage.
And for comparison, this is part of a real song from Blaze Foley called Election Day.
Hey, Mr. Policeman, please don't take my stuff. It cost me a $20 bill and probably ain't enough to get me through election day. Didn't I hear you say, it's alright, it's alright.
So yeah, you can hear the difference, but what about people who are not listening really closely or not super fans of Blaze Foley? How would they know?
That's a very tricky question. I think it is very contextual. There's a bunch of variables. There's various levels of literacy online, even without like the AI issue. I'm sure you know, like quote unquote fake news or just like misleading fake news articles online has been an issue for years. And, you know, how likely you are to believe one of those depends on, I don't know, are you predisposed to believe like a right-wing or a left-wing coded article? And then, I don't know, how old are you? How familiar you are with like the media ecosystem? Do you know the difference between a reliable website and not? You know, there's all these like variables in play. And I would say it's very much the same thing with AI generated media. I would say there's definitely like huge numbers of people who believe various types of AI generated media to be real. Again, I don't have like a hard number for you. I think like something that I don't know if you remember this, but this was very viral. There was like the image of the Pope.
Oh, I remember the puffy Pope. Absolutely.
Yeah, the puffy Pope. You know, that's a thing where it's like, you know, seemingly media literate people fell for.
I fell for it immediately.
Right, yeah, and I'm not super familiar with the Pope. I don't track his every movement. The image was very convincing, so you kind of, you know, you buy it.
I wanted to laugh. The thing is, I just wanted to be able to laugh that day. And
right, yeah, it was sort of harmless.
It was okay, right?
Yeah, so, and then also there's a problem where it's like, you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, we don't know how many people are believing AI generated media that maybe we don't know is AI generated. So it's a hard problem to quantify.
Yeah, it's getting pretty murky out there. I think it's safe to say. You did reach out to Spotify for this story. What did you hear from them about Blaze Foley and the other artists that you'd identified at least?
So initially I heard nothing, and we published a story without hearing from them because it was blowing up, and we thought it was important that people know that this is happening. Soon after I published the article, I heard from Spotify that they took all the examples that I gave them off of their platform, and they said that it was due to a music distributor called Sound On. Sound On is a company owned by TikTok, and it exists primarily as a music distributor for TikTok. So if I'm a musical artist and I want to get my music up on TikTok and I want to earn money via royalties on TikTok, Sound On provides that avenue. And in addition to that, they do distribution to other platforms. So I'm a musician, I want my music on TikTok, I use Sound On, and since I'm already in Sound On's system, they're also willing to put my music up on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, YouTube, whatever it is. And I also heard from Sound On today, and they said that they identified the user who was doing this, and they removed all of their songs, and they removed the user so they can no longer do it. They didn't explain exactly how they did it. I would theorize that what happened was that the people who manage Blaze Foley's music collection, the label, they didn't have a Sound On account. So someone just made one, convinced Sound On that they were the legitimate representation for Blaze Foley and therefore had access to his official Spotify page via Sound On. And, you know, as I was looking into this, I kind of discovered that there's a lot of middlemen and smaller companies in the, let's call it the supply chain of online music, all these small distributors, and like that system is a little messy. And I think that is where some of the deception is happening.
I'm speaking with Emanuel Maiberg, journalist and co-founder of 404 Media, a digital media company that reports on technology, how it shapes the world we live in. He has a story out this week called Spotify Publishes AI-Generated Songs from Dead Artists Without Permission. Emanuel, I want to kind of continue talking about the supply chain of music licensing on the internet you mentioned, because anyone who has dealt in kind of like DIY content creation, or what we used to just call hobbying, like going on YouTube and putting up a fun montage with your favorite songs used to be a thing you could do. It's not anymore because it's copyrighted music. YouTube auto flags it. And that just kind of seems like the standard nowadays, is that you can't really even use copyrighted content for fun on some of these platforms because they're already tied to music licensing. So it's like, on one hand, these platforms do have the ability to spot copyright infringement and fraud and deception and things like that. And they will remove your videos and block your account eventually if you're doing that too much. How is it possible that like AI generated content, which still has to have an account somewhere that leads back to somebody, you'd think, how is it kind of missing the accountability there? Like, is there a loophole that AI generated content is exploiting?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we can't speak for these internet platforms. We can only look at what they do and look at their stated policies. I think there are a few things at play here. The one that always comes up is these companies are operating at a huge scale. So if you sample a copyrighted song for 10 seconds because you're creating some new music and remixing it in some ways, but it still contains like a 10-second clip of a copyrighted song, YouTube has a system called Content ID. It will flag that automatically. It will be like, this sounds exactly like this other copyrighted music, and it will take it down. It will take it down whether it's fair use. It will take it down whether it's transformative. It will take it down even if you have permission, or, you know, some people sample their own music and they get taken down because it's just like an automated system that's very crude, and it's designed to like remove music that matches other music. It is more difficult to moderate at scale generative AI content because technically, you know, if you look at the files, if you look at the sound waves, if you look at the images, they're not, you know, pixel to pixel the same thing, but they are clearly exploiting, taking advantage of, are trained on somebody else's work and using it without permission. But like automated systems are not very good at picking that up, even if you, the artist, or you, the human user, are able to do that. So yeah, I would say like that's one reason why we're seeing the proliferation of this so-called AI-generated slop all over the internet. The other thing at play here, I would say, is that all these internet platforms that are in charge of moderating this stuff are also heavily invested in the success of these generative AI tools. So I'm not sure the incentives line up. You know, Google is not just the owner of YouTube where artists post their music. They're also creating and investing billions of dollars into making generative AI tools that they need a return on investment on. So it's not easy for them to go in and say like, oh, you know what? It's just like, we're going to nuke all this generative AI music off our platforms, because it's like, they don't want to do that. They want to make money on those tools. And that is true for Facebook. That is true for Google. And it's obviously true for all these AI companies.
Well, that's really interesting you bring that up, because they obviously have this conflict of interest, which I think is a very real effect, and it makes a lot of sense. But there's also media organizations, content producers that don't own AI tools and aren't going to profit off of owning like an actual AI. They also are having to grapple with this question of what their policies are. And very few have nuked AIs, as you put it. And most of them are trying to figure out what to do. I mean, that includes news, entertainment, social media, WDET included, public media included. I'm kind of curious about where 404 Media actually has kind of drawn the line here. Where do you guys stand on that?
Great timing for this question. My colleague at 404 Media, Jason Kebler, just wrote a piece called Journalism's Pivot to AI is Fake and is Not Going to Work. That's a position that I stand by. I recommend people read the article, but to summarize it just a little bit, and to answer your question, AI is a tool, and I think it could be very useful. I've been doing this for many years. I remember when I used to do interviews, I would record them, especially when you're writing a big feature with a lot of sources. Then you have this like really annoying task of coming home, taking all these interviews and transcribing them word by word, which takes hours. Mm-hmm. And these days, there's a tool called Otter AI that basically automates that process. You give it the audio file, it spits out the text that it hears in the audio file. I can go over it and listen to it at the same time and verify that the text is correct. And that saves me hours and hours of work. And that's an AI tool. Mm-hmm. And I use it all the time. And I think it's great. And that is something that, no executive at a media company forced me or taught me to do. That is something that I, as a journalist, as someone who does this craft every day for years, gravitated towards because it was useful for that craft. Mm-hmm. I think that works and is legitimate use of AI. I think what is not going to work and is not legitimate use is somebody who is sitting at the top of a media company and is no longer a journalist and was never a journalist, and it just, puts out this decree to his journalist employees and says, hey, AI is big. Everyone else is doing AI. You have to find a way to use AI in your work as well. How? Why? Doesn't matter. It's just like AI is hot. Find a way to use it. I don't think that's going to work in the same way that I lived through all these other previous pivots in media where, Facebook really was into live video and
the
promoted
Facebook video juicing. That was a big one.
So it's like they decided that is like a big part of their business, and they juiced their algorithms, as you say, to promote that stuff. And then every media company on earth was like, okay, we have to get into video because Facebook says video is hot. And everybody did that. And then Facebook changed its mind, and then the algorithm no longer favored video. And all these people who were hired to do video or changed their jobs in order to do video were laid off. Mm-hmm. And I think you're probably like, if you're going to follow AI for AI's sake, similarly, I think your fate will be similar.
Mm-hmm. Speaking as a former freelance video journalist who turned to communications nonprofit and then made it back to public radio, I remember that time quite well. Yeah. I kind of want to just close with where you see AI and consent moving in the future. I know that you do a lot of reporting, not just on Spotify and AI-generated music, but you've mentioned the online porn sites a lot in your other reporting, how AI is being used to kind of just generate these, models based off of real people. Is that one of the frontiers? Are there other ones? Like, where are we going with AI and consent of the people that are kind of the subject of this deception? Where are we at there? I mean, where are we going?
I hate to be like a cynic or somebody who thinks of everything just in terms of raw power, but it seems to me that ultimately what decides how this all goes is money, basically. So, for example, you mentioned non-consensual AI-generated sexual content, which I've reported on a lot. It's been a problem for years. it seemed like there was no solution, there was no end to it. And in many ways, there isn't. And I think that's going to continue to be a problem for a long time. But we are seeing some movement to remove that content off the internet, to take it more seriously. People being successfully sued for distributing it, and so on. And I think that is because the law changed to take that type of practice more seriously. And then even more importantly, the credit card companies that all these services have to use in order to make any money, they're no longer willing to work with websites that allow that type of content anymore. We're seeing that increasingly, and that is actually causing some real change in how this content flows online. And I think whatever we see in terms of consent in other fields, be it like AI generated images of politicians, AI generated news articles, AI generated music, whatever it is, it's going to come down to people's actual ability to have power here. So, the record labels are now suing all the AI companies. Either they win or they settle or they lose. But it's like that's where the actual impact, and that's what's actually going to determine how all of this is going to shake out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have one question just because I have to ask you it because I always think about this. I want to know what your take is. I'm just curious. If AI is basically only as good as the raw data that it has to work from, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, there will potentially be so much AI-generated stuff that was already derivative from, like, originally created organic content of any kind. Is there a world in which AI stuff is just feeding itself to itself, and we get into this like muddy, everything looks and sounds and feels the exact same because it's referencing itself so frequently? Like, is that a possibility in AI media in the future?
I think we're there maybe more than you would imagine. It's a problem that AI companies are actively working on. There was a point in time where they thought that was actually something beneficial to them because they have to hoover up all this data from the internet, this human-generated data, and they're kind of running out. They kind of already processed the entire internet for training data, and then they were like, okay, we need more. What are we going to do? They were like, oh, let's just generate data with AI and use that to train the AI, and they call that synthetic data. And they thought that was like, oh, that's a great solution to keep this development going. Turns out that doesn't always work so well. There's like this problem of recursion where it's just like not high quality data for the AI to train on. But yeah, it's something I think, if Spotify doesn't take this seriously and they think it's beneficial to them to just have as much AI generated music on its platform as possible, yeah, you're going to get this weird ethereal kind of music that this fake Blaze Foley song sounds like. I think in many ways we're already there.
Emanuel Maiberg is a journalist and the co-founder of 404 Media, an independent technology news website. He published a story this week called Spotify Publishes AI-Generated Songs from Dead Artists Without Permission. And he spoke with the Metro's David Lyons. Coming up, we'll continue the conversation on AI and music and discuss how creating synthetic songs and artists raises a lot of questions. Stay right there. We'll be right back on the Metro.